Hello, all of you AC fans. You eight, no, what is it? It's an A5. It's an A5. A5.
AV
No. AB?
V as in Victor, UGAV people.
Yep. Fans of the Article 5.
hmm Yep, and I've got it up on the screen if we want to go ahead and read it off into the minutes.
So, who wants to read today?
I think it's your turn.
The Congress, whenever two-thirds of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution or on the application of the legislatures of two-thirds of the states of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, and when ratified by the legislatures of three-fourths of the several states, or by conventions in three-fourths thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall on shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the ninth section of the first article, and that no state what without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. That's
Yes,
it.
indeed.
It's the most powerful part of the Constitution.
Agreed. Most powerful, most important. Okay, I did a sound check. We're sounding good. You sound great.
Good, good.
Article 5 um, is profound as always.
So I figured out where they sort of maybe come up with this. There was a question, the founders or the framers, the writers of the authors of the Constitution do not set forth exact and precise reg- rules, parameters of what a convention is. But in this series that I bought from Great Courses, which if you get an opportunity and can afford them when they go on sale, which they can be like 10%, 20% of their normal price. It's like a day or two. I say jump on what you want. And they start at $10. So,
Mm-hmm.
look into it. And I got a lot of free stuff too.
Mm.
Anyway, so on that, um, it was where that it does not actually say what conventions are. Like when they say a state can call a convention, and then it also says that the Congress can decide if conventions can be done in the states instead of the state legislators.
Mm.
And we might find that in a situation going here pretty soon.
Now, wait a second. Uh, Done in the states and not the state legislatures? Say that again.
Right, because that's when ratified by the legislatures of three-fourths of the several states. Okay, that's one way that you do it.
Right.
that has to be done
To ratify.
by all, either way in which you propose the amendment, right?
Right.
Either way, or by conventions in three-fourths thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress.
Right.
So even they can, that's what I was saying before, that Congress can ask for conventions be
Mm-hmm.
called in the states to in order to ratify an amendment,
Instead of the legislatures,
which I found interesting.
which
And
they
I
did in the case of repealing prohibition because they didn't want the same bodies to be ratifying amendments that counteract each other, basically. Right.
yes, yes, I believe that that is correct. I do not have anything sourced except hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all I have
I should make a
from the group
note.
that you and I.
That maybe should be the thing I want to research for the next time. Research the ratification of that amendment because I really don't know much about it. But how did those conventions happen? It wasn't that
Well,
long
okay,
ago.
so in this great debate, advocates and opponents of the American Constitution, that's the great courses that I'm doing in the significance and historical context in the first lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's video as well as audio, but it is still a lecture. It, it the professor, the
Mm-hmm.
doctor, he has his doctorate, um, said that when we were first doing it, before we actually had the Constitution and we only had like the Confederacy of States, I have to go back and read that again because there's a certain time that it is, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And what it said is they sort of did their definition of a convention then, which was, and I have heard this before from the same group that you and I met in, which is it would be that you could have as many delegates as you want, but you get only one vote as a state.
Mm-hmm.
Like one, like you
Right.
either vote yes or no. You don't, right. And that it doesn't matter how many people you have in the state, doesn't matter any of that. You get like one vote per state, which I guess is the same thing in a way with the state legislators. They either ratify it or they don't.
Right.
It's a, you know, so as a state. So there you have that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the idea. At least they know that much of it, which is each state would get one vote, all of them would be equal.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense because it's just counting states. You need 3/4 to ratify, which would be 38 in our current count of states. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and again, if that it was the 21st Amendment that repealed prohibition, so and apparently that took place in 1933, so that would have been what is that? Quick subtraction. Uh,
88 years ago, something
I
like
think it's
that.
like 90, right? Let's see. I'm using
Okay.
a calculator to
98 years
cheat.
ago. I'll go with
Oh no,
that.
you're right. You are absolutely right. 88 years ago. Very good arithmetic. So yeah, so to find somebody who is alive that would actually remember that happening, they'd have to be like 95 or something and they would have been, a little kid when that would have happened. So I don't know if how if we could find anyone who actually remembers living through that, or if it would be better to just talk to historians, or maybe there's video, maybe somebody documented uh, somebody's story of that happening before it was too
Well, I mean, it's
long in the
like my
past.
mom has lived through it, but it it wasn't really a big deal where they
Mm-hmm.
were living. Where it was a big deal would have been like New York,
Uh huh.
all the states that bordered with Canada,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
even Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they could get across a river, a lake, they'd drive across when it got frozen with booze
Mm-hmm.
from Canada. So there was, some stuff, but nobody was doing real moonshine. That's a lot why the southern states did moonshine because they couldn't get to Canada. And then of course California and the southern states were all getting their bootleg from Mexico.
Were they getting tequila?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's probably how margaritas came into
Yeah.
being. Or tequila sunrises. I mean, we could go
Yeah.
back there. You know, what's the other one that's made with like
Mezcal.
a Mexican coffee? And the other thing would have probably
Oh.
been Kahlua too.
Mm-hmm. Well. Uh.
But anyway, on to
Yeah.
the Article 5.
Yeah. The conventions that happened to ratify that amendment would be very interesting to learn more about how they were composed, what the rules were that governed those, um, etc. I mean, it's obviously that's a significant precedence for conventions being held, outside of state legislatures and outside of Congress, which are standing conventions. Those were like temporary conventions, which would be very similar to the National Amendments Convention, which would happen if three
I'm always
fourths
interested
or
in how they pick the
34.
people,
Yeah,
how they pick the delegates,
good
and how
question.
many delegates each state decided to have. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you could have just one delegate, but I don't think that's right. I don't think that should be correct. That you can, I mean, I think, or maybe you have to press your state when they decide how many delegates
Uh
that
huh.
they're going to send because they can send as many as they want. The
Yeah.
Congress can't limit that. Only the states can limit that. And I'd say, you want to send one? It better be me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a cantankerous old, you know what?
Right. Can they send as they can send as many as they? Well, we don't know, right? That's all stuff we
No,
really
they
have.
can't send as many. No, that is it. You
Oh,
can
okay.
send as many
Mm-hmm.
delegates, but your state gets
Gets
one
one vote.
vote.
Right. Okay.
So, and what I'm saying is, I think it would be wrong to send one delegate
Uh huh.
because then you would have no debate
Uh huh.
of whether you should amend, accept this amendment as a constitution or not. And I think that that's only right. I mean, even within the state, you should debate that. As I would think that as since all the amendments have been ratified by state legislatures
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, okay, almost state legislation. You know what I mean? Something in that allows them to bring this up and do the ratification.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be in all the constitutions of
Mm-hmm.
every state constitution. And so it would just seem that inside that, within the state legislatures, that there would be debates about whether you're going to pass this, ratify this amendment or not. And obviously, they had that about the ERA because they just didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't just do it. Like, it just didn't come in and they said, oh, yeah, okay, we'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's still not done now, right?
Right.
So it didn't get done.
Yeah.
Unlike all the amendments that have come from Congress, including the one that took 203 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
The other question I would have about those state conventions for ratification, if it went to conventions instead of state legislatures to ratify, Does each state write its own rules for each convention? Uh, and the main question I would have about that would be what percentage of the vote of the convention needs to be reached in order to ratify? Would it just be a simple majority, or would it have to be like a three-fourths of the convention to ratify for that state to add?
Uh,
Mhm.
oh, you're saying if they decide to have 20 delegates,
Yeah, or
we'll just
actually,
pick a number. Or
same question I
go
guess
ahead.
for the legislatures. Do the legislatures is it just a simple majority to ratify? I guess again,
Well,
it hasn't
we would
happened
have
in
to
my
look.
lifetime,
Okay,
so
I think that that may be in every constitution in every state.
in
That's
every state
that could be up to
constitution.
the state constitution. That's what I was talking about, is that these things could have been, because that's one of the other sort of kind of on that topic to some extent, is the other topic I you and I had sort of discussed about talking about today, which
Mm-hmm.
was Thomas Jefferson and his viewpoint of the French Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
topics. The French Revolution. How could it not be?
It's interesting.
Anyway, it's absolutely fun. And I mean, and to see it reduce itself into the, the Great Terror, and then finally they execute Robespierre on guillotine. You're just like, could you write that?
Mm-hmm.
Could I have written that as a script? Could you do that? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? If it didn't actually happen in factual reality, could that have been made up? That is so ironic. It doesn't get any crazier than that. Like, anyway, so
Well, yeah.
on that note about Thomas Jefferson, well, that was when actually the big split came between, in America, the Federalists and the Republicans. That about how they viewed the French Revolution.
Well, they
After
weren't
they
called
beheaded,
Republicans, right?
no, they were called Republican.
But they weren't a
I will
political
read it.
party, right? Until Abraham Lincoln, he was the first Republican, right?
Yes, in a yes.
Or I guess that as far as them being a
Well, yes,
party,
yes. It was
maybe they
where
were called
they
Republicans, but they weren't an actual political party
right in there. Well, and this is even before.
before any political parties.
Well, or before that they were. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Is that me? Did something happen?
Nope, you still sound good.
Okay. It all okay. It's making all kinds of noise at me.
Hmm.
Okay, where does it say what I wanted it to say?
Sorry, not to get caught up on the
I'm
semantics
I'm
of
sorry. No,
Republican,
no,
the
it's
name
all right.
Republicans. Okay.
It was more, it just has to do with um that it okay, am I not reading where I want? I should probably have taken it out of there. But it had to do with okay, and then all right. So the Dimas cream, okay, this is between with the it's my with my deepest affection with that, and then it was in 19 submitted. Jefferson argued that the treaties made with France, it was that they split into two camps in America.
Hmm.
Whatever you, one was like the Federalists, and the other called themselves the Republicans, but they were because they were for the Republic of France.
Ah,
Do you under
okay.
not for
Not
the
about
Republic?
America, but about France.
Right, right.
Gotcha.
That finally dawned on me what you're saying. And the Federalists, or maybe it was, and the Federalists were the ones who, because that's what Jefferson became Maybe it's this one. See, maybe I'm on that one. Anyway, he stayed even after they like beheaded, you know, lots of people, including the king and the queen. Jefferson still stayed in support of France, whereas many in the government of the United States thought that was just too far. They thought that that was, they were horrified.
Mm.
Okay, there it goes. American politicians, this is in, with the execution of Louis in January 1793. American politicians began openly to split into two camps: Federalists, who were horrified in the violence in France, and Republicans who applauded the end of a despot French monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, when they went into the Great Terror was, or into the terror, then finally Jefferson said, "That's too far for me." So that, so just even that of where that you think, so what was his hope? I mean, I don't know. I mean, do they think that we wouldn't have killed the king if he would have been in America instead of across the ocean? Did Jefferson think that? Because that would have been kind of not historically at all factual.
I mean,
It's very rare.
I
Go ahead.
I know that we had a obligation to assist them. I think. I mean, I guess you could see it from both sides, and I mean it. You could say, well, it was the French monarchy that helped America fight the revolution. So in a sense, our loyalty was to them, but also it was our revolution was against monarchy. So and it was the soldiers were of the people, or we could say it was our loyalty was to the people of France, and so we should be taking up their cause. Or you could say that, well, since it's an internal revolution, it's really none of our business because we could take either side, so it'd be better for us to just stay out of it. I mean, really, you could see it either way. I mean,
Well,
and
in the,
and I guess they took the latter, right? They just decided to stay out of it, right?
mm, well,
Or they started to stay out of it as far as boots on the ground. They
well,
they did other things, right? I mean, I don't know that much about it at all, to be honest. So.
no. In April of 1793, 4 months later,
Hmm.
Washington submitted to the cabinet a set of questions on neutrality and the alliance with France. So he was concerned about the treaties that had been made, all kinds of stuff. You know, I think it was just, it's a difficult position in a way for America, but it didn't. The good thing was is America wasn't really spit at the time. Like you're saying, we couldn't really help either side monetarily because we didn't have really any money. We had no real military in 1793
Hmm.
to help either side of the revolution or the monarchy, and we're across the ocean.
Hmm.
So I think because of all kinds of things, we just
Stayed out.
sort of took a step back.
Hmm.
But we weren't the only ones. I mean, I think, well, that was part of why they went after Robespierre, is because Robespierre is because, he turned out to, he was going off the edge. Okay. When you start just willy nilly and killing your own people, it doesn't turn out well for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Historically speaking, that is the most factual thing I can tell you. Very rarely does it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Revolutions can be one thing, and not all of them have to get as bloody as most of them do. But I mean, like that was sort of the difference between the Civil War in France and I mean, the Civil War in Britain and the Revolution in France. You know, the British kept sort of their government. They kept
Mm-hmm.
their parliament. But the French totally got rid of all of that, which of course didn't really work right anyway. You
The
know, it
Parliament.
was very there was a lot of inequality in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I explained the last time, like the third estate, as they call it, or whatever, had the most people and still their votes counted the least. So you had to sort of get rid of that government. Do you know what I mean? It just wasn't any way at all equitable. And I think that that is sort of the difference to me a
Mm-hmm.
lot between the Civil War and the Revolution. So, revolution is getting rid of your government. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times you don't have to always get so very bloodied into where you turn on your own people.
Well, we got
Sometimes you just go ahead.
Article 5 is the political revolution built into the Constitution.
I believe that and the more that you know of the time and what Jefferson knew going into it and the things he wrote home, and he wrote home to Madison. When I say home, America and other men, he certainly wasn't thinking that he should talk to any intelligent women at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the only woman that he cared about for the rest of his life pretty much with him in France. But we won't talk about his pedophilism. That's a
Jefferson.
subject for another day. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that's more or less about it. That he was very close, and he only came back because he was Secretary of State, and even then he still kept a relationship with France.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson. So he really he really, like I said, was a proponent of it until sort of it just devolved into the killing of the masses for any
Mm-hmm.
reason you wanted. And that's when Jefferson kind of said, "This is not doing well." And that's when America kind of said, "Whoa."
Mm-hmm.
And then Napoleon, there we go. It's not exactly like that, but what happens in between gets kind of insignificant because then all of the European powers try to take over France. And they are, and they're winning, you know, wars against them and taking land from France. And then Napoleon rises because even though they hate him because he's Corsican and not French,
Mm-hmm.
and but he is an absolute military genius at the beginning of his campaigns, and
Mm-hmm.
he brings back, you know, the land. It's when he starts going like to Egypt and trying to take kind of territory outside his realms that he doesn't do so well.
Mm-hmm.
Russia, you know,
Yep.
if he would have just stayed and took back what they lost and just
Right.
would be content with that, he would have stayed in power for till he died,
Mm-hmm.
and then
He
his
got
son would have
greedy.
taken over. He lost Josephine. They talked him out of they talked him all into getting rid of Josephine, and he always said she was his lucky star.
Mm.
She was his charm. because she couldn't have any children for whatever reason. She had two children, but then she could not get pregnant by Napoleon. And for many years, they didn't think that Napoleon could have children either. But
Mm-hmm.
finally, one of his mistresses got pregnant.
Mm.
So then he had to marry like some royalty in
Mm-hmm.
like Polish. It was Polish royalty. And then, so he did have a son with her. So he actually had an heir.
Mm-hmm. If he just wouldn't have gotten greedy and tried to take more than could be maintained.
That's really it, man. I don't know I don't know who would ever really. Well, and what's interesting is every, in both Napoleon's campaign and in Hitler's campaign of Russia, the forces of nature were not on the side of the invaders
Mm-hmm.
both times.
Mm-hmm.
Had that been the case where that it would have been a mild spring and no rain,
Mm-hmm.
Hitler could have made it to Moscow a lot quicker than he did.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of the same thing that happened in Napoleon. An early winter came and they weren't prepared. And then the people of Moscow decided to do their own scorched earth.
Mm-hmm.
They burned they burned
Right.
buildings so there wouldn't even be wood. Yeah.
Shelter and
So,
crops and stuff behind as
yes,
they were
they did.
retreating. Yep, classic.
Yes.
Mother
Yes.
Nature has her way of shaping the course of history.
Oh, she has. Oh man, she's been more important than fucking armies
Mm-hmm.
when it all comes down to it. And we know more and more about that because we can analyze battlefields. It's
Mm-hmm.
quite fascinating that, but we won't get into that. We'll go back to the Article 5. But the Article 5,
Mm-hmm.
it is our way to let off the steam of, so we don't have a revolution, so we don't have an insurrection. So I say to those people that are saying that Trump is still the president,
Mm-hmm.
then work on your state legislators. If you so much believe it, if you so much believe it can be true, then surely there must be some way, like getting rid of the electoral college, that we can make sure that another election is not stolen,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? If every person had a vote and you won by the majority of votes
I mean, I don't
instead
think
of
you
the
could convince them of that, but I definitely would agree with it. I mean,
it
I'm
was
for
only by 40,000,
yeah,
so I mean, it's a
but
lot
that's yeah.
easier to catch 40,000 votes
But
in
without the
three
electoral
states.
college, it wouldn't have been 40,000 in three states. It would have been 2 million or 3 million, whatever it was. So
Well, yeah,
it would have been a
but
lot farther off from being close. But I get your point. I mean, as far as or just say an amendment that there must be a paper trail. Every election has to be done on paper ballots. You could do that constitutional amendment, um, or
yep,
and automatic recounts for this and this. Criteria triggers automatic recounts,
yep,
uh, or
sure.
you could do an amendment that was, um, yeah, that there will be established a department of elections that oversees fairness and X, Y, and Z. Uh, yeah, get rid of the electoral college and establish department of elections.
I just worry about that too.
What?
Because you seem to be able to politicize so many departments. I mean, that's what we really saw under Trump. That's what really concerned me more is how he was able to, in a way, politicize the EPA,
Mm-hmm.
which was set up by Nixon,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of where you do have to ask yourself, where did the Republicans of Nixon, and he was no great guy, where are they? Where are they? I mean, like they hate the EPA. Their own set it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's to protect everybody,
Yep.
not just who do they. I mean, it had to happen because of Love Canal.
Hmm. I don't know
That's the
that.
one that caught on fire
Mm.
by itself,
Mm.
and people were living next to it.
Mm. Interesting.
And now, you know, obviously there were tons of health problems, birth problems. One can just go down that
Mm-hmm.
road, and I won't go into detail, but there wasn't a choice. He didn't have a choice. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, maybe they've just gotten better, but I don't think that corporations have gotten better. I think it's just hadn't gotten so bad, but we're pretty much on that that path right now if we're not
Mm-hmm.
there already. I mean, if I were to interject a little weather news, it'd be pretty terrifying.
Mm-hmm. It's like they plugged up. They kept putting plugs on the cracks in this dam, but eventually the whole thing is just all patchwork, and you can't just keep plugging up little cracks. Eventually the whole thing is going to topple.
Well, that bridge in Mississippi
Mm.
is a bridge that's got a crack in it that they've closed down indefinitely.
Oh, right. Well, that's an infrastructure issue, right?
That's an infrastructure thing, yes.
Yeah.
But I
But
was
it's
saying
like our
about real.
infrastructure is related to environment, because it's like we haven't updated
Hmm.
our infrastructure, so it's all outdated and
Old, and it's not running as efficiently
yeah,
as it
inefficient.
should,
That's what I was trying to say.
and therefore it's not even efficient. I mean, it's not even cost effective that much anymore. Like to change it over would save so much money, and we are already talking. Oh, that was the other thing that I on the Weather Channel, my very political channel.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about how the so many cities have no money for climate change
Mm-hmm.
disaster. They don't. I mean, like they don't know what to do. Countries don't have money for climate disaster situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've got a really big red bloom once again, and it is killing the sea life of Florida.
Mm.
Bad. This one is really bad.
Mm.
And and of course, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, you need to, if you want to stay sustainable, if financially you want to stay sustainable, like in Florida, you need to keep your environment sustainable. That means you
Mm-hmm.
have to keep the earth sustainable for yourself, for a selfish, petty reason
Mm-hmm.
to feed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Please hear me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be for a noble and great cause. It can be so you can have a frickin' job.
And food and water.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm more or less talking about is you need to keep the environment, especially in Florida, if and tourism. I mean, 90% of that money that comes into that state's like tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And because the other one that's killing them is their agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all that waste has gone into the ocean and it's changed the environment because of what's in the waste of animals.
I mean, you could do an amendment that was an environmental protection amendment. I think that would be, it'd be possible. I mean, I don't know exactly how I would write it. I'd have to give it some thought, but something along the lines of like uh, equal amount of money has to be spent on conservation as is spent on, development or something, or I don't know what, but you know.
But that's what we've always said about an Article 5. When you call for the convention, it's just supposed to be on a topic.
Right.
Okay, you get a topic about the environment, about if you want it to be secular, about if you want it to come down to every single person understanding that if you don't take care of the earth, you won't have a job
Uh-huh.
and you may not even be around.
Yeah, if it's
The
the
other,
environment.
I've decided on, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, just your point about it's a topic and it can be limited to one topic. If it's the environment, if it's
Hmm.
education, if it's legalizing cannabis, etc. Like, it can be called on a topic, even
Getting
if you don't
money out of
money out of
politics.
politics, term limits, what have you. It can be limited to whatever topic you're calling for. And no, you don't have to have the actual language of the amendment to call a convention. That's how it's always been done.
And praise be for that, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to have to think of one. I don't want to pull one out of my ear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, nor do I think I should be the one writing it anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm qualified in the sense of that I I would I would want the language to be make sure that it's going to say what I want it to and that it can't get all screwed up. And you know how that works these days.
Well,
You
and it
really
has
need
to
somebody
have
to.
for something to have that kind of mass appeal, it needs to have a collaborative effort work on it,
Right,
like a convention. That's the whole project
right.
of democracy, is to have collaboration, if we believe in that sort of thing.
That's right. So those that was pretty much sort of my topic of the day about that, revolutions are okay. They are okay. You just got to be careful
Mm-hmm.
because they can get really nasty really quick.
I mean, really, we should call Article 5 the revolution article, you know, the
Or the
political
anti-revolution.
the political
It's actually
revolution
the anti.
article. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's not.
the
Yeah, it's the
peaceful revolution.
peaceful
Mm-hmm.
revolution. Hmm.
Yeah.
That's what it is because yes, they want it because the only thing that you may not be able to get is a new government, a totally new government,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to have the states still ratify that. And that's where it all becomes complicated because if you're changing the government, then how do you expect the government that's being changed to ratify the amendment you're making and have it somehow have validity? But see, that's why other people should write an amendment instead of me
Mm-hmm.
because I get confused far too easily.
Well, and I mean, it's not. I don't think we have to worry about anything too radical because it has to pass that 3/4 ratification. So I mean, if 3/4 ratify a completely new government, then so be it. That's democracy, in my opinion. I mean, if
That's how many state legislators no longer want to be in this democracy.
yeah,
Which I'm not sure that I believe, or certainly
no,
don't believe now.
no.
I have no fear of that. Which brings me into sort of one of the free things I got on the great courses.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the Civil War and what was the cause of the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, of course, it is slavery, and it's not exactly. It's more sort of what is going on here, which is it works with the Second Amendment, the conspiracy of we will, enact laws, we will enact regulations that will take away your guns.
Mm-hmm.
So it has more to do with that people will get and go further in a um, how what do I want to say emotional way. based on conspiracies. And I'm like, wow, you could be talking about today.
Wait, so was this written in what are you saying exactly? Conspiracies at the
This
time?
okay, so what it was is that what this professor of this about are you
Wait, you cut out. I lost you. Still can't hear you.
can you hear me?
Okay, yes, now I can.
Yes. It's because somehow I keep hitting that and I don't know how I keep hitting that. But
Mm,
anyway.
it's okay.
All right. So this professor, it's
Hmm.
called, I've got to get this one, American History for Skeptics.
Hmm.
That's that's the name of the course.
Interesting.
So in this lecture, what he is talking about is, well, we've had
Uh oh. Now I really lost you. Hold on. You dropped out of Discord. What happened? Okay, we'll wait. Oh, okay, you're back.
oh, it just dropped me. It just dropped me, but it could be,
Mm,
dropping a call or just my computer or
mm,
my internet or any numerous things here,
it's
as
okay.
you know, in this.
You're back now, and you were just saying
Yes.
the course is
About
called
okay, this
American
professor.
History for
Oh,
Skeptics.
it is.
That was the last thing I heard.
Something like that. I'll
Hmm.
make sure. Okay, so what this professor is saying is that even though we've had this conflict about slavery for many many years since the Constitution was written, right? Since
Hmm.
we became the United States, why then did nothing else happen? Why before did we not have a civil war? He said that what had happened is sort of conspiracies of both on both sides about that their way of life was going to be under siege. It was going to be taken away. It was going to was something, and somehow these at that time these conspiracies to grew legs, wings, whatever, flew
Conspiracy
all over,
theories,
got
or
in
do you
the
mean
idea
they were
in
actually
people's
conspiracies?
minds.
Yeah. So the conspiracy theories in people's minds grew legs, and they thought that that life was going to be subverted somehow.
Well, okay, it was sort of like what he was saying. It's sort of about the Second Amendment. There is a
Okay.
group that says every time that a certain political party is in power, one political party always says they're going to come and take your guns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when did that political party that is in power right now come and take your guns?
Mm-hmm.
When?
It's so you're
But
saying
but
that conspiracy theory has been much older than we might suspect.
they're going to come and take your slaves.
Ah. Oh, I see. That was the evolution of that. They're going to come and take your ex property. It went from slaves to
There
guns.
you got it.
Okay, interesting.
And they haven't, and those white supremacists that want to burn the place to the ground haven't still stopped using that.
I see. So it went from slaves to guns because
Or to anything.
yeah, I mean, mhm.
They're going to take your freedom.
Mhm.
They're going to take your
Your hamburgers.
property. Right. They're going to
Mhm.
take your beef.
Yep.
They're going to make you have an electric car.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the other side, who actually, that's the part about when he says, well, the other side grew in this conspiracy theory too about, oh, they're going to make the whole United States, they're going to make you have slaves. Well, okay, maybe they weren't going to make you have slaves, but there was more of an ideal because of the Supreme Court ruling as they had done that the conspiracy that slavery might be in every frickin' state
Mm.
was
Mhm.
more of a possibility
Mhm.
because as one group, one political party negotiated, they always negotiated about slavery. The Missouri deal, something compromise, right? The Mason Dixon line, that yada yada yada.
Mhm.
They compromised and compromised until what happened was is that the Supreme Court did the case, which said one guy said, "Well, look, I'm going to this state that doesn't allow slavery because it's above the Mason Dixon line,
Mhm.
but yeah, I want to take my property with me." Okay, I am not talking that way.
No, of
I
course.
want you to know.
Mhm.
But I want our audience to know that ever.
Mhm.
I am only repeating what was basically, I'm quoting right
Mhm.
here, paraphrasing, but it's his quote. And the court said, well, if that person is the same as your cow and you can take the cow,
Mhm.
then you can take the person
Right.
because they're both your property.
They talked about this in that 14th Amendment documentary I
Hmm.
watched, and I can't remember the name of the court case, but yeah, it was a big letdown for the the side of abolition, and then
Well, the side that did not want to see slavery go into all parts of America.
right.
Now, this historian, or this professor, kind of makes me, he kind of disappointed me because then after that, which I thought that was very good, what he did there. It was
Mhm.
very clear, a very good argument, although he did not bring up what I just brought up about the side that was against slavery felt that there was more of a conspiracy, and that was because things were happening that made it look like that, whether it was or not. But the Supreme Court doing that made the people who didn't want to have slavery feel more under attack, which would be normal,
Mhm.
right? That would be pretty common. So just like you said, they were very disappointed. So it was, what he said is, well, it would have never gone into the other states. That's not necessarily true. It may not have gone in as a plantation
Mhm.
way of life,
Right.
but as someone in your family explained to me about Missouri, that almost every household in Missouri owned a slave. Now, why do you think that that would be? What could possibly make people want to own slaves? Just like one servant in their house. Who are you identifying with when you do that?
Uh,
The rich?
right. Just as a status symbol, basically, we're rich enough to have a slave, a house.
Well, right, right, like, or you know what? This guy has a plantation and he's got a bunch of slaves, or he's got a mill and he has a bunch of slaves, or he has whatever, and
Mhm.
and he's making. Well, one day I may only have one slave now, but tomorrow I could have more.
Right.
So you're seeing owning someone else as a way to accumulate wealth,
Right.
and that becomes an
Mhm.
inherited thing.
Mhm.
Which, okay, I think I just got sick a little bit saying that. I'm sorry. Because it
Yeah.
sounds so awful just to say it.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes when I say things, audience, it, to hear it out loud almost makes me nauseous. It does, because I think it's just such a degrading way for anybody to live, whether you are the owner or the slave,
Mhm.
because it denigrates everyone. because it is just that. You have to think that you are better than. The minute that you really think that you're better than, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're really not. We all are really the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an ugly,
There's so
ugly past
yeah.
in this country and all humanity.
Well, and it just historically, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, historically speaking, it's an ugly past. Slavery historically everywhere is ugly, right? It's never good.
Mm-hmm.
It's never turned out really well for either civilization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for any civilization who took a lot of slaves. Rome. Rome was built on the backs of slaves. Everybody talks about it. And when they could no longer get slaves, it couldn't function anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Well,
the Byzantine Empire did. The Muslim Empire did. Do you know what I mean? The Muslim Empire.
mm-hmm.
Eventually, you have to material. You have to, you. Anyway, we'll move on that. Don't.
Well, it's kind
But
of
it's just
interesting.
not a good way.
I mean, it's interesting
Right.
that America was able to get rid of that way of life without completely collapsing. I mean, I guess a war, in a sense, that's an argument for why a civil war needed to be fought, because it's like that entire uh, infrastructure and just way of life had to sort of be eradicated. I mean, I guess they couldn't completely burn out the mentality that led to it, but they, you know, uh, had to, a lot of the people with that mentality had to be killed off. And I mean, our whole country basically had to be rebuilt from scratch, more or less. I mean, it wasn't we kept the Constitution and they passed an amendment that outlawed it, and therefore it's like we were able to move forward, where those other civilizations, Rome, etc., I mean, they were around a lot longer, and it was a longer period of collapse. I mean, you could argue we're collapsing now, but it's like we still had our greatest era came after the abolition, uh, after Reconstruction. And who knows? Maybe our greatest era is still ahead if we get our shit together. Are you there? Did I lose you? Well, I lost you again, but maybe that's okay. I guess we're almost at an hour. We're at 58 minutes, so it's probably a good time to end it on a high note. Our greatest era could still be in the future. We just have we just have to keep Article 5 alive. Are you
Are you
there?
there?
Yes, you're back.
Yeah. I know. Well, sometimes I'm sorry. I must tell you all. I have terrible internet and I have a terrible connection and I have a metal
Yeah, it's all right. That's probably a good place
roof.
to leave it.
So,
We're at an hour
but I didn't hear what
exactly.
you said
So,
about the Civil War. But you'll have to tell me.
oh,
That was the last thing I heard.
I was just saying, uh, we could still have our best days ahead of us if we keep hope alive.
With the Article 5.
Boom, nice.
Okay.
All right.
And all you out there, whatever fans we have, you have a good week.
Yes.
We'll see
See
you
you next
next
time.
week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.